Welcome to the Journey to Happy podcast, where you get concrete tools for mindset work, my best tips for lowering your anxiety. And you also hear funny and encouraging stories from me and others who have stories to share. Around here, you'll discover the easy way to stop overthinking, to get rid of self doubt, and finally embrace a calmer, more confident you. I am Olga, your host, a former therapist, a life coach, wife, blissfully an IVF mother, and a coffee lover. I'm excited that you tune in today, and I'm honored to be on the journey with you. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and today I am here to talk about a subject that I think involves every single human on earth, or can help actually everybody, and that's how to get out of overwhelm. Overwhelm is such an easy state to get to, and I've recently experienced it, and I was feeling so freaking annoyed by being overwhelmed that I decided it was time to talk about it in here with you guys and hopefully inspire you to take some action to get out of overwhelm. Are you a human who can easily feel overwhelmed? There is that personality. Like we all know there is a kind of personality who's more likely to uneasily feel overwhelmed, where other people, such as myself, it takes us a lot longer to finally feel overwhelmed. For me, and why I ask if you're one of those people is because it's important for you to recognize if that is sort of like who you are naturally. And so you have to be far more intentional than the regular person to get yourself out of overwhelm and to even recognize your red flags so that you are not in a constant state of overwhelm. Like you can almost prevent it before you get there. For me, usually, because it doesn't happen often, because it's not my nature, what ends up happening for me is that normally I will suddenly feel overwhelmed and I'm like, how did I even get here? And so that is, for me personally, a cue that something is off balance, that I have left my balance and I've done too much of something and too little of something. So recently, as I was preparing to take vacation, I knew I had 2 weeks off, which meant 2 weeks I'm not doing work, which meant I had to do that job, that work somewhere before those weeks that I was taking off. Raise your hand if you've ever felt overwhelmed before vacation. Sounds insane, right? We should all be feeling so excited before a vacation. But if you're like me, yeah, that means you've got to plan better. So out of overwhelm, to me, it's such an important subject of conversation and one that I was really inspired to bring into the podcast because of the personalities that I usually coach. Type A personalities are incredibly organized. They've got their shit together. However, they can easily get overwhelmed and they do have their shit together, but at a high cost. Their stress levels, their peace of mind. And so I've often find myself having these conversations with my clients about how to make things a little bit less overwhelming. And you know what? Is never as difficult as it may sound. When we're overwhelmed, we tend to believe that the mountain is just too high to climb, but that's only because our mindset has been blinded by the stress that we are imposing on ourselves. So a few things for you to note when you're thinking how to get out of overwhelm. First and foremost, notice that you're in that overwhelmed state. And so by noticing that, you get a choice to say what you want to do about it. So many of us notice that we're overwhelmed and we just keep going. We keep pushing. We're like, yeah, I know I'm overwhelmed, but I'm still going to try and do all of these things by myself. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm going to do A, B, C, and D, and I'm going to do it all by myself because I've got it. And there will be a time where I'm no longer going to be overwhelmed. What I've learned about the state of overwhelmed is that it will increase. It's not going to go on its own unless you intentionally do something about it. So I asked you earlier if that's your nature, if your nature is to feel overwhelmed. If it is, you really have to take intentional action to stop yourself from that state. Okay. So you know that it doesn't take much, that your threshold of being overwhelmed is very small, that it doesn't take much for you to be there. And if you're like me and it takes a lot for you to feel overwhelmed, that only means you have more capacity to process that sensation of finally getting to an overwhelmed place. But here's the key. The solution is the same, whether or not you are the person who easily gets overwhelmed or not, if it takes you a while. We all have to use our intentionality to finally say, oh my God, this is enough. I've got plenty on my plate. What makes us normally feel overwhelmed? The lack of delegation. When we think we're the only ones who can possibly do it the right way. Perfectionist in the room, I'm talking to you. Often you're procrastinating. You're not doing it and you're not letting anybody else do it. And that on its own feels overwhelming because that's a to-do task that is sitting on your list and you just know you have to do it, but it has to be done your way. So you don't want to ask for help. That feels overwhelming on its own. So for anybody listening, and I know easier said than done, my husband is a perfectionist. Many of the women I coach are perfectionists. I know how hard it is and the process that it takes to finally delegate, to finally be okay with the thing that you want to do being done a different way, but still being done. At the end of the day, what makes the feeling of being overwhelmed feel better is that something got done, accomplishments, that long list of things that you want to do has gotten shorter. So I highly encourage you guys to become familiar, comfortable asking for help and delegating. Who can do this? And does it really have to be done your way, or else it's not going to happen? It's not going to function. Think about that for a moment. And if the answer is actually anybody can cook the meal and we'll eat it, even though it's not my way, you could still get it done. And it's something that is out of your tasks to-dos. The other invitation I want to make for you is not everything is a priority, but when we are in the state of overwhelm, everything seems like a big priority. I was meeting with my team a few weeks ago and they were like, okay, what do you want us to start with? And I had such a hard time saying what the priority was because I was in a state of overwhelm and everything felt like a priority. So it took me a stepping back, taking a deep inhale and really seeing what was in front of me and just asking myself, what must happen today? What has to happen this week? What has to happen this month? What can like it's important, but can be done later? And just going through a list, labeling things A, B, and C, A being that most happen, B saying, this is really important, shortly after A, and C being, you know what, this can wait. That was life-giving, people. So if you're not in the habit of, like, if you are feeling overwhelmed, and especially if you're somebody who easily gets overwhelmed, that might be because you are prioritizing everything. And so what's the point of a priority if it's the same as everything else, right? Like priority means you're taking that outside of that particular list and you're creating something with it. So I want you to think about that. If you're feeling overwhelmed, it must be that you are prioritizing everything. So you have to put something on top of others, and some things are okay to wait. And the moment we notice that, we calm down. We're like, oh yeah, this actually can wait. Another step to get out of overwhelm is to do things. Okay, so when we're overwhelmed, we end up procrastinating because we can't do, like, let's say that you have less time, something has happened, you're now don't have childcare, and you still have the same amount of hours. And so you tell yourself, well, I'm not going to be able to show up and do this work the way I would normally do it. So I'm not going to do it at all. So you end up doing nothing. And that on its own, it's freaking overwhelming. Just like I was saying earlier, the not doing and not letting anybody do, delegation. The invitation here now is to do it in some way, even if the standards have to be lower for the time being. You say, okay, for now, because I'm overwhelmed, this particular thing has a risk of never getting done. So I am going to do it differently, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be okay with that being my reality for the time being. So, for example, if you have a really busy week at work and your husband is gone traveling for work, and you normally make these really elaborated meals, tell yourself that for the next week, it's okay if you pick up food from the warm bar at the grocery store, or if you eat frozen food that week, because that's what has got to happen for you to feel light, fun, and easy throughout the week and not overwhelmed. So that's another perception that I invite you to have, is how can I be okay lowering my standards for the time being, because it needs to be done. It's better that it gets done than it doesn't. Like it will lower your feeling of overwhelm by getting it done, even if it means that you have to modify your standards for the time being. And also reminding yourself that just because you're okay with that now at this particular moment, that your standards get lower, that doesn't mean that becomes a permanent state of your standards, right? Like, you know your standards and you know that normally you will do your work the best possible, but when you're sick, maybe you're doing it halfway, as fast, and just being understanding of that. And lastly, I want to leave you with physically taking a time out or a break. I call this my recalibration practice, my resetting practice. And that is when I notice, holy macro, I actually need to step away from work or from my children or from the thing that's feeling overwhelmed and just change the scenery altogether. Press reset, go out, move if you want to move, go for a run, go scream, write in your journal. I don't know what you want to do, but there is a time when you're feeling overwhelmed that your mind is going to tell you, you cannot afford to take a break. You cannot afford to do anything but continue to think of the things that are making you feel overwhelmed. Trust me when I say that, that is the perfect moment to press reset, change the scenery, bring your mind to a different place, bring yourself back to zero, and start all over again. I cannot tell you how powerful this last point is. So this is a short episode, but I really wanted to leave you with something that helps you think about how to get out of overwhelm. Remember, that is a natural feeling. We feel swamped. We will say things like, oh my God, I've got so much to do, so little time to do. The more you say that, the more stress you feel, the more overwhelmed you'll feel. So just take a deep inhale, do one thing at a time. All you have to do at the moment is the thing that you're doing. Do not multitask. Do not multitask. At all costs, avoid multitasking. You can only do one thing at a time, so you may as well do it well. Take a step back. If it's feeling overwhelming, it means you've got too much of something, too little of something else, and that's likely time away from work. So just step out or step out of the scenario that it's feeling like it's consuming too much of your time. Balance things out. Come back in with a fresh set of eyes, fresh mind, and you will see things differently. And naturally, you will stop feeling overwhelmed. I hope this was helpful. And if it was, I want you to share this with somebody else, subscribe to my podcast, and also give me some feedback. Tell me what you're thinking about it, what you like, what you don't. I'm always looking at growing and improving. And I'm always wanting to give you guys information that you want to hear. So tell me what you love for me to talk about. And if you're somebody listening to my podcast and thinking, oh my God, I should be sharing my story with Olga, reach out to me. I will absolutely love to have you as a guest in my podcast as well. Okay, that's it for now. Leaving you with a big heart and wishing you all the best. Talk to you guys soon.